Let's start by understanding something most people overlook. The first few minutes after you wake up are not ordinary moments. They are a neurological opening, a brief window where your brain is still halfway between the subconscious and the conscious state. In this space, your mind is incredibly receptive, not just to external information, but to internal dialogue. What you say to yourself in those early minutes quite literally becomes the found for how your brain organizes the rest of your day. From a neuroscientific perspective, this is when your brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to rewire and form new connections, is at its peak. Your cortisol levels have just begun to rise, preparing you to face the world. Your brain transitions from theta to alpha waves, the same frequencies associated with deep meditation and learning. In that moment, your nervous system is listening attentively for signals that tell it what kind of day it's going to be. Is it one of stress, self-doubt and distraction, or one of calm, control, and direction? That answer begins with your words. Andrew Huberman often emphasizes how our internal dialogue shapes our physiological state. When you wake up and immediately check your phone, scroll through messages, or think about all the things you didn't do yesterday, you're effectively conditioning your brain to associate waking with stress. The neural circuits that manage focus, emotion, and motivation are hijacked before you've even had breakfast. But when you intentionally speak affirmations, statements of truth and direction, you're reprogramming those same circuits with intention. Let's think of this like training a muscle. Each morning thought is a repetition, and each repetition strengthens a neural pathway. When you tell yourself, I am capable of handling whatever comes my way today, you're not lying to yourself. You're activating the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for decision-making, focus, and goal-directed behavior, while quieting the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. The more often you repeat this, the stronger that connection becomes. Over time, your baseline reaction to challenge changes. You become calmer, more adaptive, more in control. This is the science behind what many call mindset. It isn't just positive thinking. It's a physiological recalibration. It's you deciding which neural networks fire first thing in the morning, the ones that create anxiety or the ones that create agency. And here's the fascinating part. The brain doesn't distinguish much between external reality and vividly imagined experience. When you affirm, I am grounded and focused, and you truly feel those words, your body begins to respond as if that state is already real. Your breathing slows. Your muscles relax. Your attention sharpens. That's why affirmation without emotion rarely works. You can't just say the words, you have to mean them, or at least lean toward meaning them. The emotional charge is what tells your nervous system this matters. Without it, the brain treats affirmations as background noise. But when you pair language with feeling, you send a biochemical signal, a release of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin that reinforces the experience. That's how you begin to shift identity from the inside out. There's also a deeper, more philosophical dimension here. Mornings are not just a biological reset, they're an existential one. Each morning, you are, in some sense, reborn. Consciousness flickers on again, and you're given another chance to decide who you are and what you'll become. The question is, you wake up remembering who you've been, or do you wake up rehearsing who you want to be? Most people wake up in memory, replaying yesterday's worries, yesterday's failures, yesterday's limitations. The brain, ever efficient, defaults to old programs. But affirmations invite you to step into imagination, to remind your mind of possibility before the world tells you otherwise. Neuroscience meets philosophy right there, in the simple act of self-directed thought. When you choose what to focus on in the morning, you choose which parts of your brain will dominate your day. If you affirm peace, you activate networks associated with emotional regulation and clarity. If you affirm purpose, you stimulate the dopaminergic pathways tied to drive and reward. If you affirm gratitude, you shift activity toward the insula and the prefrontal cortex, reducing anxiety and increasing resilience. In other words, you are no longer a passive observer of your own mind. You're the architect. And this isn't about ignoring reality. It's about preparing your brain to engage with it effectively. When you affirm strength, calm, or confidence, you're not pretending everything is fine. You're giving your nervous system the tools to make it fine, to respond to difficulty with balance rather than panic. It's a biological feedback loop. The mind shapes the body, and the body reinforces the mind. That's why the best affirmations are not wishful thinking. They are conscious instructions to your physiology. So tomorrow morning, before the noise of the world reaches you, pause for a moment. Notice the quiet. Feel that soft border between sleep and wakefulness. And in that silence, speak to yourself with intention. Because those words, the ones you choose when your mind is still fresh and open, are not just thoughts. They're blueprints. They are the instructions that tell your brain who you are and how you will experience your day. Now that we've understood why the morning is such a powerful window for mental reprogramming, the next question becomes, what exactly should we be feeding the mind during that window? It's one thing to know that affirmations work on a neurological level, but it's another to choose the right ones. Those that reach deep into your identity, not just skim the surface of positive thinking. The goal isn't to recite random phrases, hoping they'll stick. It's to speak the kind of language that engages the mind's most powerful systems of focus, motivation, and belief. The brain is a prediction machine. Every thought, every behavior, every emotion we experience is filtered through what the brain already believes to be true about us. So when you begin your day with a certain set of affirmations, you are essentially feeding your brain the blueprint it uses to interpret the world. You're not changing reality instantly, you're changing the lens through which you perceive and respond to it. And when that lens shifts, your entire experience of life begins to shift with it. There are 5 foundational affirmations I believe can serve as anchors. 5 statements that, when repeated with intention, can gradually reshape the architecture of the self. These affirmations aren't just motivational slogans. They are deliberate neural cues that target different cognitive and emotional circuits in the brain. Each one serves a specific psychological purpose. The first is simple but foundational. I am in control of my thoughts and emotions. This statement trains your prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive control, to take command of the limbic system, the emotional brain. You're reminding yourself that emotions are signals, not dictators. Neuroscience shows that simply labeling an emotion activates the same brain regions involved in emotional regulation. So by affirming control, you're not denying that you have feelings, you're asserting that you have agency over how you respond to them. This is self-regulation in its purest form, a dialogue between the rational and emotional mind that creates balance rather than chaos. The second affirmation, I attract peace and purpose into my life. This one speaks to attention and perception. The human brain has a filter known as the reticular activating system, or RAS. It determines what information enters your conscious awareness. When you prime your RAS with affirmations like this, you're effectively training your brain to notice patterns of calm, meaning, and alignment. What you focus on, you find. If you tell your brain to look for peace and purpose, it will begin to identify opportunities, environments, and people that reflect those values back to you. It's not magic, it's cognitive filtering. The third, I have everything I need within me to succeed. This is a deeply powerful reprogramming statement. It targets the brain's self-efficacy network, the belief that you can influence outcomes through your own actions. When you repeat this affirmation, you're teaching your brain to rely less on external validation and more on internal capability. Psychologically, this builds resilience. It shifts you from a reactive state, waiting for life to happen, into a proactive one where you trust your own adaptability and resourcefulness. And the more your brain experiences small wins aligned with this belief, the stronger that network becomes. The fourth, I choose gratitude over worry. Gratitude, from a neurological perspective, activates the same circuits involved in empathy and reward. When you express or even think about gratitude, your brain releases dopamine and serotonin, chemicals associated with well-being and motivation. It's a neurochemical counterbalance to anxiety. Worry activates the default mode network, the part of the brain that ruminates about the past and future. Gratitude pulls you into the present. So when you affirm gratitude, you're not just practicing positivity, you're recalibrating your brain toward mental stability and emotional presence. And finally, the fifth affirmation, today I show up as my highest self. This is about identity. When you say this, you're signaling to your brain who you intend to be, not someday. The mind takes cues from the language you use to describe yourself. If you define yourself as disciplined, confident, or compassionate, your brain begins to search for behaviors that match that definition. It's a process called self-referential encoding. The more often you associate yourself with elevated traits, the more likely you are to act in alignment with them. You are literally sculpting the narrative of who you are becoming. Now, what's remarkable about these 5 affirmations is that each one corresponds to a domain of mental mastery, control, perception, belief, emotion, and identity. Together, they cover the full spectrum of human potential. But their power doesn't come from mere repetition, it comes from engagement. You have to feel them, visualize them, embody them. Pair them with slow, intentional breathing. Imagine what each statement looks like in real life. The brain learns best when words are linked to emotion and sensory experience. That's what turns abstract affirmations into embodied truths. And here's where philosophy meets neuroscience again. Affirmations are not a form of delusion. They are a declaration of intention. They are a way of saying to yourself, I acknowledge the chaos of life, but I choose to orient myself toward meaning. When you affirm peace, you are not denying the existence of stress. You are choosing not to be ruled by it. When you affirm purpose, you're not claiming to have all the answers. You're committing to finding them. In time, these statements evolve from language to identity. You no longer have to tell yourself you're calm. You simply are. You no longer have to remind yourself to act with gratitude. It becomes instinctive. The brain's plasticity ensures that what you repeat becomes who you are. So tomorrow, when you wake up and your mind is clear, take a few moments before the world intrudes and speak these truths into existence. Not as empty words, but as commands to your nervous system. You are not programming fantasy. You're programming focus, control, and growth. Now that we've explored why morning affirmations matter and what to say, the final question is how to make them work. Not as hollow rituals, but as real mechanisms of transformation. Because the truth is, affirmations alone don't change your life. They're the ignition, not the engine. What makes them powerful is how you integrate them, how you combine language with emotion, repetition with action, and intention with behavior. That's where science meets practice and where the mind begins to evolve in measurable ways. The human brain is not designed to change simply because you tell it to. It's designed to change through experience, through consistent sensory, emotional, and behavioral reinforcement. When you speak an affirmation in the morning, you're planting a seed, but that seed only grows if you feed it through the day with aligned actions, physiological states, and conscious reinforcement. This is what neuroscientists refer to as experience-dependent plasticity. The circuits you use repeatedly become stronger, those you neglect begin to fade. So if every morning you affirm, I am calm, capable, and focused, and then spend your day rushing, multitasking, and reacting to stress, your brain learns confusion. The circuits of intention and the circuits of experience compete, and the stronger one always wins. That's why pairing affirmations with action matters so much. You're not just speaking new thoughts, you're training new patterns. The words are the signal, but the follow through is the proof your brain needs to start believing them. Andrew Huberman often talks about the connection between cognition and state, how the mind doesn't exist separately from the body. When your body is in a reactive, stressed posture, your thoughts follow. But when you align physiology with intention through breath, posture, and movement, you send powerful feedback to the brain. This state is real. Imagine you wake up, take a few deep, controlled breaths, and stand tall as you speak your affirmations aloud. You're not just saying, I'm in control. You're showing your brain what control feels like. The nervous system learns through coherence. When your words, actions, and emotions all align in the same direction, another essential factor is repetition. The brain changes through frequency and consistency, not intensity. A single morning of affirmations won't shift much, but 30 consecutive mornings begin to build momentum. Each repetition strengthens the synaptic connections between neurons, gradually making those thoughts your default wiring. Over time, what started as deliberate effort becomes automatic. You move from saying, I am confident, to being confident without the need for constant reinforcement. But let's talk about emotion, because this is where transformation either happens or fails. The limbic system, particularly the amygdala and hippocampus, plays a critical role in encoding experiences that carry emotional significance. When you speak affirmations mechanically without emotional resonance, your brain doesn't register them as important. But when you infuse them with feeling, when you imagine, even briefly, what it would feel like if those words were true, your brain begins to tag them as meaningful. Dopamine and norepinephrine are released, amplifying attention and motivation, which helps those neural patterns stick. This is why visualization enhances affirmation practice so powerfully. When you say, "I am becoming more focused every day," take a moment to visualize yourself in that state. Calm, centered, engaged. See it. Feel it. Your visual cortex and motor regions light up as though the event were actually happening. The brain starts to blur the line between imagination and experience, making it easier for your body to act in alignment with your words later in the day. You're essentially rehearsing your future self. And here's the deeper philosophical layer. Affirmations are not about pretending to be someone you're not. They're about remembering who you are capable of being. They reconnect you to a state of consciousness that already exists within you, one that gets buried under habits, conditioning, and self-doubt. When you affirm strength, peace, or focus, you're not fabricating them from nothing. You're reactivating latent circuits that your brain has simply forgotten how to use. It's self-directed evolution, conscious neuroplasticity in motion. Of course, transformation requires friction. There will be mornings when the words feel empty, when your mind resists and your body feels heavy. That's precisely when the practice matters most. The repetition through resistance is what ingrains new identity. Neuroplasticity doesn't occur in comfort. It occurs in the moments when you choose intention over instinct. When you remind your brain who's in charge, that's when you cross from theory into embodiment. There's also something to be said about environment. If you can pair your affirmation practice with natural light exposure, as Huberman often recommends, morning sunlight activates your circadian rhythm, elevates mood, and primes your body for alertness. Combine that with slow breathing and deliberate thought, and you've now created a neurochemical environment optimized for focus and learning. You've turned a simple morning ritual into a biological accelerator for mental clarity and growth. What all of this points to is that real transformation is a loop. Thought influences physiology, physiology reinforces thought, and together they shape behavior. Affirmations, when practiced with emotional depth and behavioral follow-through, become the language through which you instruct your nervous system to evolve. Over time, they stop feeling like an external practice and start becoming an internal truth. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, it's that affirmations are not about convincing yourself of something untrue. They're about building the bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. One morning at a time.